Yeah, hello and welcome. Today we will talk about scoring within the Adobe Experience Platform. My name is Artur Rutkiewicz, and this session is a little bit out of scope of the other sessions regarding the Experience Manager, but I'm pretty sure you will be excited because the AEP, the new tool from Adobe, is pretty cool, and you will get some first insights. So before we start, some words about me. My name is Artur Rutkiewicz. I'm an Adobe solution consultant and team lead since 2020 at diva-e. And originally, I came from analytics, especially Adobe Analytics, then targeting, actually Adobe Target, and from more or less one year on, I'm working also with the Adobe Experience Platform. So today's agenda, I will talk a little bit about a score called RFM. It's just one example. So we will get a little bit theory of this one. I will then introduce the new experience platform, which is, I guess, very interesting for you, especially for those who are not familiar with that. And finally, we will have a hands-on session where I will show you the whole process and also the platform. All right, so RFM scores. RFM stands for Recency, Frequency, and Monetary. It's a framework to categorize users, and the calculation is quite simple. So for all of these three categories, we are calculating so-called quintiles. For those who are not familiar with this term, you could say it's like 5 different buckets. Very important to understand is that the scope of the value of these buckets have the same size, but the users are not equal in equally divided in those buckets, so equal in values, but not in for the visitors itself. The recency can be calculated by the recent visit, and it's always relative. So if a recent visit was like today, and for another person like yesterday, the first one will get a better score than the other visitor. Then we have the frequency, the number of visits within a defined time period. In our case, it will be 30 days, just for to make it easy. And finally, the monetary value, so the generated money by this visitor. And as you can imagine, all of these categories or dimensions are pretty marketing focused. So the main purpose of such a score is to have a simple indicator for the value of the customer. So I can really easily say, okay, this customer is very valuable for my company, or there are some actions I have to do. Short disclaimer. RFM scoring is widely known among marketers, among those who work in the marketing region. However, there are plenty of different variants, and you can discuss the scores very long. But for this presentation, I just choose this very simple example. Okay, let's do an example. So we have our three dimensions: recency, frequency for the last 30 days, and monetary. And I create scores from 1 to 5. So these 5 buckets. A score of 1 is very bad, and a score of 5 is very good. And let's do one example. So let's say we have a user who has a recency of 4. So apparently this user was quite recently on my website or app, whatever I'm looking at. The frequency is 2, so quite low. So maybe within the last 30 days, the visitor was there just for let's say 2 times. And finally, a monetary value of 3, which is quite good. It's in the middle, right? So he or she purchased something. So finally, we would have a score of 4 to 3. But if you look at all possible combinations, you will have up to 255 scores, which is a bit too much for our simple use case. So we are doing what is called a combined score, which is a combination of frequency and monetary. So the 4 here is taken from recency, and for frequency and monetary, I'm calculating 2 plus 3, which is 5, divided to 2 would be 2.5, but we're only taking the whole number, so the 43, which is a quite good score. And the last slide regarding the scoring. So it's possible to classify those scores. So if you see on the bottom, you have the recency score and the frequency and monetary score, the combined one. You can like put it into um, um, a, a graphic like this. And if you classify those scores, you will easily understand how they are working. So a score of 1-1, for example, is a user which is not really interesting, never purchased something, wasn't there very often, wasn't there recently, and the exact opposite are champions or our power users, which are purchasing a lot, which are very frequently and very recently on our website. And of course, those different classifications or those different users need a different way to communicate with. Because if I have, for example, new customers who haven't purchased yet but are like very active, should be addressed differently than someone who was already active but not recently. All right, so that's the theory regarding the scores. And now let's talk about the platform. And that's pretty exciting because I'm pretty sure most of your guys maybe heard a little bit about it, but just some rumors, let's say. So the Adobe Experience Platform is the customer data platform solution from Adobe. And a lot of acronyms, but a customer data platform is, let's say, a marketing tool or mainly a marketing tool that aims to stitch data from multiple sources into one customer profile. So imagine you have data from your web, your app, from your CRM system, from social media, whatever, and you are getting all those information into your platform and create one customer profile out of it. And this customer profile can be used then for analysis, for calculation, just like we will do right now, and also for activation purposes. So for marketing reasons, right? You can then address, for example, within a display advertisement, the user very individual. And this is done by, of course, by available identifiers. So for example, a customer ID. Something which is very unique for the Adobe Experience Cloud is that Adobe decided to develop this in-house. It's not an acquisition. And Adobe plans or actually already uses the AEP as an underlying architecture for most of the Adobe Experience Cloud technologies. So especially for Adobe Target, Adobe Analytics, and so on, and also Adobe Campaign. Okay, so how is the architecture structured? So we have a three-step approach. First, we need the data collection. So data is flowing into the platform. We can, for example, do this by streaming connections or also by batches. But in our case, just imagine you have a website and you are tracking the behavior of the user. So we need a web SDK or web JavaScript library to collect data. This is sent into the platform. And here the magic happens. So data from these single sources are stored within the data lake, which is a PostgreSQL database. And those single data sets then are stitched to a common or to one customer profile within the real-time customer profile service or database. So you have different services which ensure that one profile is created here. And with this profiles, you can do a lot of amazing stuff. For example, use them in destinations, do some advertising, whatever. And we will do some calculations here. So we have to look into the data lake for the single data sets. And we will do some queries here within the platform. We could also use the data science workspace. This is a feature which is actually designed for use cases like this. But the data science workspaces are very good documented within the Adobe documentation, and the approach I'm showing you today with the query service is not documented, and I thought that's very interesting for such a very simple use case I will show you just in a minute. And we also need an API because we will schedule the query, but this is for later on. Okay, that's the architecture. And now let's start with the interesting part. So we have some website data, right? and I created actually some mock-up data to simulate this. So we have a timestamp here. You can see I did this for May and June 2020. We have an ID called here adaptTo ID, but let's imagine it's very similar to, for example, the Experience Cloud ID, so to identify the user. And sometimes we have a monetary value. So for some events, the user purchased something. These IDs are not all unique. They will appear a couple of times because we want to identify, for example, the frequency, and that's why it cannot be unique here. All right, and now let's jump into the platform. I will show you my browser. Okay, that's how the platform looks like. We have a couple of different options here, and we will look especially into the data management part and later on into the customer part where we can actually use those scores. So we start with the schema, and I prepared already an input schema. So this is where the markup data I just showed you will flow in. Data is stored within data sets, but data sets are based on schemas. So this defines the logic of the data, the logic of the data fields, and so on. And for our use case, it's very, very simple. So we have one object where all the imported informations are stored, the ID, the timestamp, which is here called datetime, and the monetary value. For those of you who are familiar with the platform, just one hint, it's an experience event class. So it means that it's very much time-based, this information, and we need an ID and a timestamp which will be generated automatically. I will just show it to you within the data set. So this is our base data. And I did the ingestion in August. So you can see I ingested the UI, okay. I ingested almost 10,000 records on the 17th of August into the platform. And if we look into the data set, we can have a short preview. It will look very similar to the mockup data I just showed you in the PowerPoint file or the PowerPoint presentation. So we have our timestamp, we have our ID. Then these IDs here are created automatically, so we can ignore them. A timestamp is also there because I ingested this apparently on the 17th of August at just afternoon. And sometimes we have for our single records, we have a monetary value. I have to scroll down a little bit here. We have something, and here. So yeah, I hope this this mockup data really looks like real tracking data of your website, or of a fake website here. So now let's look into the query service. So the AEP has this SQL tool included, and I can query the data directly within the platform. And this is what I have done for our scoring. And I will start on the bottom because this is how the statements are structured, and I will go up to the top. So first, I did something I called an interim calculation. So I have to query the data from our input data set. I group this by the adaptTo ID because, for example, for the monetary value, I want to have like the whole sum, right, for one ID, or for the frequency value, I want to calculate how many times the user was there. So that's why I have to group it. And there is also a filter. I have to admit I was a little bit lazy, and I just used a fixed timestamp here because I know that the data is only until the end of June. For a real use case, I would use dynamic dates here. But yeah, for this presentation, it should work fine. Okay, I'm selecting the ID. I'm selecting for the R value the difference, the date diff for my fixed day and the last timestamp. I can count. I can distinct count the timestamps for the F value, for the frequency value, and finally I sum up all the monetary values for my M value. And here I have already my most important informations. And now I have to do the scoring. So we go up a little bit. And here I do the RFM calculation. There are there are for sure also other possibilities how to calculate it. Just keep in mind you cannot use, for example, the entile function because we're not creating same size buckets, but the values have the same yeah, the same scope. So this is why I decided to use this approach, but it's just for yeah to show you how it can work. So I'm selecting again the ID and creating the R score for each ID, right? From 1 to 5. And I also put here an X just to ensure that nothing within the calculation is wrong. Then I did the same for the F value or F score, and finally the M score. For the M score, I used a 1 because if no monetary value is selected, yeah, that's a 1 for our scoring here. Finally, because I'm calculating a combined score, I have to use, or I use the ceiling statement to add both values, both scores, divided it through 2, and finally I have my combined score, which I called here the FM score. So that's yeah, that's this magic. And finally we'll do uh, the output, which will be my idea and the content command for the R and FM score to create the RFM score. You might be surprised I'm using here the struct statement. It's because I have to follow the schema of the platform. And now let's look into the schema of my output data. So I created another schema for output. And this time it's also within an object called SPNAM, where I put in two more data fields, which is the RFM score and my ID. This SPNAM object is the object we have for our company. So another company will have another object here, but all the custom data fields are always yes summed up in this this special company object. All right. One interesting information here for the adaptTo ID, I used an identity, so I can later on find the profiles. And for those who are familiar with the platform, this schema is a profile class because yeah, the score is really really something which is stick to the profile of the user, and it's not a time series information. All right, so yeah, I have to follow this the structure. This is why I use the struct statement, which is, by the way, not documented, at least when I looked in the Adobe documentation. So, and finally, I have to create my table. I use here my output schema and create a table which is called output dataset. I highly recommend to use the create table command for the first time, and then when you do further calculations, you can use the insert into command. If you are not doing that, and for example, click on this button here, the output dataset, a so-called ad hoc dataset will be created, and these ad hoc datasets are not cannot be activated for profile filing, and that's yeah not really useful. So I highly recommend to do this this approach first. Okay, so I run the query. It takes a little bit time, so I prepared it already on the 19th of August. Yep, and let's look into the data. We have an scoring here, 21, 51, whatever, an ID, and then also some IDs which are created automatically. The records decreased. Now we have around 2,500 records because, as I said, the IDs occur a couple of times, and we don't have 10,000 unique records. If you want to know how often these scores will appear, I did this very simple query, and we can actually see that, for example, the score of 2021 occurs 876 times, and so on and so forth. And for example, a score of 44 is only 3 times. And I did some visualization as well, just to show you how it looks for our mockup data. So we have a lot of data here in the the bottom, and the higher data is actually 0, which is well that's how the mockup data is structured. So yeah, that's how it looks like. All right, I will jump back to the platform, and yeah, let's look for one of these IDs. So I preview the data set again, and I can just randomly choose one of the IDs. Okay, I don't know, somewhere here. So for example, this one here, and the score should be 51. So I'm going into the profile service, select the adaptTo ID as the identity namespace, and search for my ID. Here we are. Okay, some random profile, and the score is 51. Great. So that's what we want. I can then use my information within the segment section. So for example, I did one here for just RFM exists, but if I create a new segment, I can just search for RFM, our relevant attribute, and select. Let's look for the 51. And estimate how many people will be here. The estimation is not exactly the same as the query. It's just how the platform work. And now I can do some RFM score is 51. Save it and use it for marketing reasons. Okay, last part. I mean that query is fine, but it's not scheduled. I have to do it every time automatically. But Adobe provides a very cool feature within its API. So it's possible to schedule queries. It's a post call to query schedules, and within the body, I have to define all the necessary attributes. For example, I have to choose the database name. I have to do the SQL query in one one line. That's a bit strange, but yeah, interesting. And please keep in mind, don't use quotes; it won't work. So yeah, my computer is a little bit slow, but okay. You have the command here. Then you can give a name, a description, and the schedule itself. The schedule is as a cron job, and it will run every noon at 12, and starts on the 1st of October. So let's run it, and it should be successful. Okay, so it's registering this query. And we have a unique ID here, which we can query. So let's copy this one here, go into the get statement. So it's the same, just as a get, slash, and then our ID. And let's look what happens. So it should be, still registering. Important to know is within the headers of the post call, you should also put in the content type application/JSON. That's not mentioned in the documentation. Just one interesting insight. And last thing regarding the API, it's also possible to disable queries or to delete queries. That's also possible with for this API, like this delete function, and I just have to define then the ID. All right, so perfectly on time. I'm finished, and do you have any questions? Okay, thanks. I cannot see any questions. That's great. So in this case, thanks a lot, and I hope you will enjoy the end of the adaptTo. Great.